Hello everyone and welcome to the Gunpla Network. I'm the Spicer, and this review of the HG Iron-Blooded Orphans Hajiroboshi comes to you courtesy of those wonderful folks over at Canadian Gundam. Canadian Gundam is your one-stop shop for all your Gunpla and Plamo needs here in North America. You can find this kit and many others like it to add to your cart, and once you've hit that checkout page, don't forget to use the promo code Gunpla Network for 10% off. In the comments down below, let us know what you pick up. Now before we get into the finer details of the high-grade Iron-Blooded Orphans Hajiroboshi from the mobile game Urdr-Hunt, there are a couple of highs and lows I want to talk about because there are some really interesting things on this kit. One of the most unique parts of the ASW-G-35 Gundam Hajiroboshi partially comes from its line art. Now, this is going to sound a little strange for what I'm about to say, but having the larger portions kind of behind the elbow helps it have one of the most unique gimmicks for attaching a shield I've seen. Now, I know there are more advanced things, like, of course, the perfect grade Unleashed RX-78-2 is going to be magnets, but the swivel system being built into the arm to attach the shield is really cool, and I would love to see it on other designs. The problem is, this kind of had that possibility because of the line art. It had the bulky elbow portion behind the elbow itself, behind the actual joint, so they could fit this in. I could see this with a couple of other Iron-Blooded Orphans kits, but this is going to be really unique, and ideally, maybe they'll find a way to kind of make it a little smaller and fit it in other things in the future, but I think this is just such a cool feature. Another really nice little quality of life change is the solid weapon storage on the side skirts. In the past with Iron-Blooded Orphans, it's been kind of hit and miss. Some things stick better than others, and this is really stable, really solid. Everything clicks in, slides in really well. You don't feel like anything's gonna fall off, either the actual attachment to the side skirt itself, or the weapons. Everything is very secure, moves very easily. It's not loose, but it's also not too tight. It works really well. Now, in terms of the more aesthetic side of the gimmicks, these binders on the back skirt are really interesting, and I really like it. It makes for one of the most unique form factors for Gundam, but at the same time, they get in the way a lot. They're cool, but they're just really problematic. I like them, but honestly, it helps a lot to remove them when you're posing because they're gonna fall off. Like, the peg isn't the most secure thing, especially when you're bumping into them all the time, trying to move the legs or move the arms and they're hitting the fins. It's cool, but it does have its drawbacks, which leads us into some of those drawbacks. And one of them, unfortunately, is something the Iron-Blooded Orphan line's kind of been plagued with. The ball joint connecting from the torso into the waist, it still exists. It's part of Iron-Blooded Orphans. There's nothing we can do about it, unfortunately. But it is a little more stable here. It's definitely no Kamara's Vidar. It's not super back heavy. It doesn't have all the stuff going on up top. But it does still fall off. The torso and the legs come apart very easily, so kind of keep that in mind, but I get the vibe if you're buying an Iron-Blooded Orphans kit, you probably already know that. And now, into kind of just the general kit itself. And in general, overall, it is a fun build. It's not something that you're going to labor on, but at the same time, it is not something that's going to give you a lot of options. Now, instead of going through the normal, traditional articulation that we've all seen a million times, I wanted to talk more about the posability, because articulation's all well and good, but if you can't use it or it doesn't work the way you need it to for a pose, it's kind of pointless. And posability just seems generally more important to me. So in terms of posability, you can get quite a bit out of them. Even with those high heel feet, they move well enough pretty much everywhere that anything you're wanting to do on the ground, you're going to be able to balance them out. And I've tried to put in a couple of shots here so you can see some examples of what I'm talking about. The weight is pretty well distributed even with those giant binders on the back, since they're pretty hollow. They're only a couple pieces. It's not going to mess with everything too bad. Now, you will need to move them around to get them out of the way, typically more so of the arms. The arms like to bump into those massive fins more than anything else. But outside of that, the arms do move pretty well. The shoulders do get in the way just because there's that little piece jutting out towards the head, and then the V-fin's massive. So you do have to work around that when you're posing, but it's not all that difficult. You do kind of have to move the shoulder a little bit more, but with them being on ball joints and that traditional Iron-Blooded Orphans kind of swing mechanism, it works pretty well. You can do it, you just kind of have to be a little more thoughtful. Honestly, I wish the design didn't have those little pop-ups on the shoulder, but it is what it is. And generally speaking, getting him to look down the gun is pretty easy. Getting the crab shield into a nice offensive attack pose is actually pretty easy. It's stable enough that if you actually wanted to use the claw parts to grab onto something, they will work. They actually will hold something and help balance, so if you're trying to push a graze back like I am here, it does help balance that out a little bit. The Smart Mace is also just 2 pieces, so it's very light. You're not going to have any weight problems. It's not like a massive mace or mace sword. It's pretty light. It's not going to weigh the arm down. It's not going to drag it down over time almost at all. And the connections on pretty much everything on this kit are very stable. So all the articulation you're getting in the shoulders, in the feet, are doing you wonders. That's really where most of your dynamic articulated posing positions are going to come from. That's a nice mix of words there. But realistically, any pose you're going to want him in on the floor or on the air is going to be possible. The biggest thing you're going to have to work around are the tops of the shoulders poking into the head, and those wonderful binders on the back. Just, they do look really cool when you get them in a good pose. It's just getting them in a good pose isn't necessarily all that easy. And in terms of how the Hajiroboshi matches up against some of its IBO brethren, we've got it here with the Gundam Barbados Lupus, and you definitely get the vibe they're from the same universe. Very distinct, very unique form factors in terms of their V-fin and their head and just their entire body. You see the same sharp chests that most all of the Gundams share, at least all the iterations of the Barbados, and then of course this. You get the really big knees that kind of jut out from behind the leg, and you also have those high heel designs, although these are significantly different visually speaking. But if you want to put this on a shelf and you've got a lot of other Iron-Blooded Orphan stuff, it's going to match very well. You're not going to have to worry about this standing out too much. But at the same time, with that nice subtle lavendery color, it's still going to have its own presence on the shelf. It's not just going to get lost in the sea of everything else. Is it one of the more aggressive designs in IBO? Realistically not. The Barbados Lupus and the Lupus Rex are far more aggressive, but it does have its own niche within the series, visually speaking. It's going to look good up against Gundams, it's going to look good up against Greys and other grunt suits that you have from IBO. The one thing I will say is, personally, I'm going to have this displayed in a standard static standing pose like this. It's not that you can't display this in a really dynamic fashion, but those binders really do hamper it if you don't have a lot of space to play with. And it looks fine, it looks good just standing there. So that's my personal preference. If you want to pop them up on a stand, get some really cool poses, especially with those binders being moved around, you can absolutely do it. But personally, I won't be doing so. Now, in terms of the overall just kit itself, from beginning to end, opening the box to finishing it, it's pretty solid. This is a bit of a sticker nightmare. I didn't point that out before just because I'm honestly going to go back and paint most of these spots. The crab shield's got quite a few. The binders, I did leave some stickers off just to show you guys kind of what it looked like without going too much into it, because I don't want to have to clean all that residue off before I paint them again, because it's just going to look so much better with paint, even if it's going to be a little off. I tried to use a Gundam marker on the shoulders just to see what it would look like, and the bigger markers don't fit in the groove too well, so you do have a little access paint that comes out. I don't really think the stickers look bad in the actual groove itself on the shoulder, but up on the little top part on the shoulder, they don't look great. They don't fit super well either. There are some red stickers on the front skirts. They're fine. I'm probably going to leave those. But that being said, this will go a long way visually if you put a little bit of love into it. If you've watched a couple of different reviews of this, you know that a couple of other people have done their own kind of different top coats, some glossy, some matte. I think there's benefit to both. I think a glossy one definitely kind of has it stand out more from the Iron-Blooded Orphans crowd, especially with them kind of being these more realistic, heavy mech mobile suit type vibes. But a nice shiny gloss finish kind of gives it that new, brand new off the factory line look, and I think that is something this design pulls off very well. If you want to throw a matte top coat, it will blend in very well with the rest of your Iron-Blooded Orphan stuff, and that lavendery color and that plastic will work very well with a matte top coat. But if you decide just to leave it as it is out of box, it still looks fine. It's a really nice kit. Visually speaking, the design's good. The proportions, the way the plastic was made is definitely fine. You get the high quality Bandai plastic as always. Nothing is loose other than kind of that torso joint, but that's a pretty standard IBO thing, nothing crazy there. And in terms of the stickers, they're alright, they're not terrible. Posability, really good, especially if you're keeping it on the ground. Those ankles move everywhere. And I do want to mention, I've seen quite a few people modify theirs to where they've got those little jets on the ankles moved up to the side skirts where the weapon storage is, and I think that does look good. I think it matches more the silhouette of the mobile suit, but personally I will be leaving those weapon storage things there just because I think they look good, they're very functional, and they work well. But if you have any questions about the build, the kit, the painting, anything about this kit, leave them in the comments down below. I will do my absolute best to try to answer them. And of course, like this video if you've enjoyed it. Check out our other content. Our other reviewers are doing wonderful jobs. And of course, keep on building.